Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He moved to the mountains for peace, no clients, no neighbors, just silence. But when shadowy figures appeared on his land at midnight, they didn't know one thing. They'd just declared war on a man who used to bury HOA boards for a living. And he's not done yet. When I first saw the place, I thought it was a sanctuary, quiet, remote, and far enough from Denver that I could hear my own thoughts again. After the divorce, peace and privacy were worth more than any downtown office. The property sat just below the foothills of the Sawatch Range, a single-story ranch house on 3 acres of stubborn Colorado soil. The previous owners had lost it through foreclosure, and I'd picked it up through a court auction. The irony wasn't lost on me. Me, a property lawyer who'd spent half his career dealing with cases just like theirs, now living in the aftermath of one. The air out here smelled of pine and dust, a combination I didn't know I'd missed. I set up my small home office in what used to be a guest room, wired in cameras around the perimeter, installed a and steel fence, solid, rust-colored, unapologetically modern, and told myself that this time I'd live quietly. No clients, no neighbors, no fights over easements or fences, just silence. The first week was uneventful, blissfully so. A few nods from people driving past on the road, the occasional wave from the couple across the meadow. Then, the second week, the oddities began, small, almost laughable things at first. The orange cone I'd left by the driveway disappeared. One of my motion cameras went offline. I chalked it up to weather, maybe a raccoon. But when I checked the garden one morning, I found a single set of boot prints in the soft dirt near the tomato beds. They weren't mine. Too wide in the sole, too clean. That night, curiosity turned to unease. I pulled the feed from my exterior cameras. The timestamp read 2 nights prior, close to midnight. 3 figures slipped into frame from the tree line. The motion sensor light didn't trigger because they stayed in the blind spot near the side gate. I leaned closer to the screen. They weren't kids. They were dressed too neatly, moved with intent. One held a tablet, another carried a clipboard. They circled the house like surveyors on a mission, whispering to each other. When they reached the side porch, I recognized the voice. "Measure the boundary to the oak," said a woman with that clipped, self-important tone that could only belong to one species of human, the HOA president. "He'll have to comply once we document the encroachment." Her name was Karen Beckett. I'd met her briefly on moving day when she stopped her SUV just long enough to inform me that I'd bought into a lovely community with high standards. I told her my property wasn't part of Willowcrest HOA. She smiled the way lawyers do when they already think they've won. On the video, Karen pointed toward my fence. "He's right on the edge of the old perimeter. We can file it under non-renewed common land. Once we add it to the map, he'll have to join." The man next to her, Randall, if memory served, the HOA treasurer, took photos with his phone. The third one, a thin woman holding the tablet, must have been Molly, the HOA secretary. They didn't knock, didn't announce themselves, just wandered around, taking pictures of my windows, fence, even the carport I'd started assembling. Then, as quietly as they came, they vanished back through the brush, leaving nothing but boot prints and the faint impression that I'd just been burgled by suburban bureaucrats. I sat back in my chair, hands clasped, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. Of all the possible nightmares, wildfire, bears, trespassers, I'd expected nature, not a homeowners association I didn't even belong to. I replayed the footage, this time noting the timestamp, the angle of their entry, the parked cars visible at the neighbor's house. I took screenshots, exported clips, and filed them neatly into a folder labeled Evidence Trespass. Old habits die hard. Still, part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd realize their mistake. Maybe tomorrow Karen would drop by with an apology pie and some weak excuse about boundary verification. But something told me this wasn't a one-time intrusion. People like her rarely stop at boundaries. They redraw them. When I stepped outside later that evening, the wind had picked up, bending the grass into silver waves. From the ridge I could see the neat roofs of Willowcrest glinting under the moonlight. Uniform, perfect, identical. My house looked like a scar beside them, unpolished, defiant, utterly out of place. And somehow, I knew that was exactly what offended Karen Beckett the most. I checked the locks twice before going to bed. 2 mornings later, I found an envelope stuffed into my mailbox with more force than necessary. It wasn't the kind of passive-aggressive HOA newsletter filled with sunshine fonts and clip art of American flags. No, This one had the kind of sterile formatting and legalese that made my blood pressure rise before I even opened it. Urgent notice. Willow Crest Homeowners Association. I already knew it was going to be good. I made coffee before opening it. The letter inside was 4 pages long, typed in Times New Roman, like all the best bad decisions. It started with a cordial welcome to the neighborhood, and then took a hard turn into the absurd. According to the HOA, I owed $4,100 in delinquent dues and community maintenance assessments. Apparently, the strip of grass near the northern edge of my fence, grass that I trimmed, watered, and reseeded myself, was technically common ground adjacent to association land, and therefore subject to shared maintenance costs. It got better. They also accused me of violating architectural codes. My corten steel fence was deemed visually disruptive. My carport lacked pre-approval and did not conform to community aesthetic standards. I had failed to submit architectural plans to the Design Review Committee. The pièce de résistance was the final paragraph. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in escalating fines, enforcement action, and potential legal proceedings. I flipped to the attached documents and nearly choked on my coffee. There they were. Photos of my fence, my carport, my backyard, clearly taken during the midnight trespassing tour. Angles only possible from inside my property. They even included a red circle around my firewood stack with the caption, "Non-compliant storage." No return address, just a phone number and an email ending in willowcresttc.org. The email bounced when I tested it, which seemed about right. It took me less than 10 minutes to build my response. I went into my home office and opened the folder I'd labeled HOA Idiocy. I printed the original court ruling from 6 years ago, signed, sealed, and recorded, that legally excluded my property from the HOA's boundaries. I added the county zoning map showing my parcel carved out like a surgical incision from the middle of Willow Crest. I stapled the judicial exclusion order, signed by a district judge who'd likely never imagined someone would try to reverse it, with a PDF template and a spreadsheet. Then came the fun part. I attached the camera stills, high-resolution time-stamped, infrared enhanced, showing Karen, Randall, and Molly traipsing across my land in the dead of night. I included close-ups of Karen's clipboard, the license plate of Molly's Honda parked illegally across the street, and a frame of Randall stepping through my garden beds like a drunk elk. At the end, I drafted a formal letter addressed to the Board of Willow Crest HOA. It was not polite. I made it clear that I am not, nor have I ever been, a member of their association. Their incursion onto my property constituted trespassing, a criminal offense under Colorado Revised Statute. Their use of images taken on my private land without consent was a violation of privacy and property law and would be treated accordingly. Their attempt to levy fines on a non-member amounted to fraudulent misrepresentation of authority. I closed with a warning. Any further contact was to be made through legal counsel, and that I had already initiated a preliminary complaint with the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office. The packet was hand-delivered that afternoon. I drove it over, walked past the manicured hydrangeas and sun-faded flags, and slid the envelope directly into the HOA's locked community mailbox. Then I stood there for a moment, just long enough for a nearby ring camera to catch me raising my coffee cup in salute. Later that evening, I sat on my back porch and watched the sun dip behind the hills. For the first time in days, I felt something close to satisfaction. I'd seen these HOA games before, seen the paper tigers bluff and bluster and try to bleed compliance from people who didn't know better. But I wasn't just another homeowner. I was the goddamn end boss in their little game. And they'd just kicked down the wrong door. I was in the middle of patching a spot on the fence where the wind had knocked one of the lower panels loose when I saw the cruiser. It rolled slowly down the gravel path, like a mountain lion testing the edge of territory. 2 county sheriff deputies inside, both wearing sunglasses even though the clouds were thick and low. They didn't hit the lights or siren, just parked like they had all the time in the world. I knew that posture. I'd worn it myself once back when I worked for the DA's office. Non-hostile presence with an agenda. I set down my hammer, brushed the rust off my gloves, and walked to the front gate before they could step out. "Morning, officers," I said. "Let me guess, Karen Beckett sent you." The older one, tall and lean with a slow drawl, looked amused. "Mr. Sloan, depends. Who's asking?" I held up my hands, palms empty. The younger deputy smirked. "We just want to talk, sir. I invited them onto the porch, offered coffee. They declined. Ma'am down the street filed a report, the older one said. Claims you sent her threatening correspondence. Said you implied physical harm and legal retaliation. I didn't laugh, but it was close. Instead, I stepped inside, returned with a manila folder, and handed it over like a magician presenting the finale. Here's the letter I sent. Signed, dated. Includes all supporting documentation. You'll notice there's no language even close to threatening, unless you find legal citations aggressive. The deputy flipped through it. I could tell from the raised brow that he was reading the HOA's midnight break-in with the same disbelief I'd felt watching it the first time. The younger one glanced over his shoulder. Is this Karen Beckett, HOA president? That's her, I said. That's also Randall Bell, treasurer, and Molly Green, secretary. On camera at 2:30 in the morning, on land that doesn't belong to them. They didn't knock, they didn't announce. They photographed my private property without consent and used the images in an attempt to extort dues from a non-member. The older deputy nodded slowly. Well, damn. He handed the folder back and cleared his throat. Mr. Sloan, did you represent the Grayson family up in Boulder Pines? That thing with the illegal access road and the board president's son's construction business? That's me, I said. That case settled in 11 days. I remember. That board got gutted. Seems like I attract repeat performances. The deputies exchanged a look. The younger one shook his head and said, to be honest, we figured this was another Karen freakout. We've had several noise complaints, fencing arguments. One time she accused a UPS driver of flashing gang signs. I leaned against the porch post, arms folded. Glad I'm not special. They stayed for another 10 minutes, mostly just asking for copies of the footage and the letter for their own report. I handed them everything on a flash drive and watched them pull away, with the lights still off. Karen stood in her driveway the whole time, arms crossed, watching like a general assessing the results of a failed invasion. I raised my mug toward her, no smile, just acknowledgement. A silent declaration of war. That night, I received an email from someone calling themselves MG. The message was brief. We need to talk. I didn't sign off on that letter. This is going too far. Please don't respond here. M. I stared at it for a long time, the cursor blinking. MG Molly Green, HOA secretary. The same Molly who stood in my yard 2 weeks ago, measuring my tulips like they were a threat to national security. Was this remorse? Fear? A crack in the dam? Whatever it was, I knew better than to ignore it. HOA boards didn't fall apart from external pressure alone. They crumbled from within when one of the faithful realized they were about to be holding the bag when the cops showed up. And now, it looked like I had my first defector. The first red flag came disguised as municipal blandness. A pale yellow notice duct taped to my mailbox post, flapping in the wind like a warning flag on a minefield. Zoning review notice. Potential violation. I stared at it for a full minute before peeling it off. According to the Chaffee County Zoning Office, someone had filed a complaint about unpermitted structural additions, meaning my carport, the one I was halfway through building, entirely within code, with full diagrams and pre-engineered specs sitting on my desk. 2 days later, I got a letter from the Colorado Department of Revenue. An anonymous report has been submitted regarding potential unregistered commercial activity at your residence. Apparently, someone thought I was running a business out of the house without a license. I mean, technically, I was a lawyer working from home, but I wasn't charging clients, wasn't advertising, wasn't even answering calls. The week after that, a community enforcement officer showed up. Friendly guy, too apologetic to be faking it. He said he'd received multiple noise complaints, claims that I was operating power tools after legal quiet hours, and hosting loud gatherings. I live alone. I own exactly one power tool, and the only loud gathering I'd had recently was when I sneezed 3 times in a row and scared a squirrel off the deck. At that point, it wasn't just harassment. It was a coordinated effort, death by bureaucratic paper cuts, each complaint subtle enough to look legitimate on its own. But I'd been in the game too long to miss the pattern. Someone was trying to swamp me with red tape to keep me busy or penalized or too tangled in compliance hearings to fight back. I didn't have proof yet, but the timing was too perfect, the language too coordinated. I had my suspicions, and they all had the same haircut and taste in weaponized passive aggression. And then Molly emailed again. This time she wasn't cryptic. She wrote from a private Proton mail address and sent attachments. No body text, just the subject line, I can't be part of this. The files were PDF scans of internal HOA emails, not printouts, screen captures, real-time message threads between Karen, Randall, and Molly. In one, Karen writes, "If he pushes back, hit him with nuisance complaints, zoning, tax board, noise, anything. Make him prove he's clean. People like that always slip somewhere." In another, "We can bury him in process. He can't fight everything. He'll cave." There were even drafts of emails meant to look like they came from different neighbors, all written in the same voice, same grammar, Karen's voice. The metadata in the file confirmed what I needed. The documents were created on a device registered to the Willowcrest HOA office computer, and the original author was listed: full name, email address, and digital fingerprint, Karen Beckett. I printed them all, stapled them, made copies, scanned the scans, and made encrypted backups. I uploaded a set to a private cloud with a lawyer friend of mine in Boulder, just in case. Then I filed 3 official complaints in rapid succession. One with the county zoning board, citing harassment and fraudulent reporting. One with the State Department of Revenue, requesting investigation into false tax reporting. And one with the sheriff's office, submitting the documents Molly had given me as evidence of conspiracy to harass and intimidate. It felt surgical, clean, no screaming, no threats, just facts. The next day, I saw Karen in the grocery store. She looked at me like I was something sticky she'd stepped in. I smiled and waved. She didn't wave back. Later that evening, someone threw a crumpled HOA newsletter onto my driveway. No envelope, no postage. Inside was a blurb in Karen's President's Corner column. "Some residents have forgotten that living in a community means following shared rules. Those who think they are above, that will soon find they are not." Cute. I took out a red pen and wrote across the page in thick block letters, "Try harder." Then I mailed it to the HOA P.O. box. No return address. I met Molly Green at a gas station just outside Buena Vista. The kind of place where no one would think twice about 2 people sitting in separate cars, idling with windows cracked, speaking softly through barely opened glass. She looked like hell, dark circles under her eyes, nails chewed to the quick, and a twitchy nervousness like she was afraid Karen would parachute in from a drone. She passed me a thumb drive in a plastic baggie like it was evidence from a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. "I saved everything I could," she said. Emails, internal memos, meeting recordings. Karen's been using the board like her personal hit squad. Randall's too dumb to realize he's being used. "I didn't sign up for this." "You literally did sign up for this," I said, not unkindly. "Secretary of the HOA, right?" Molly sighed and rubbed her temples. "I thought it was going to be bake sales and landscaping decisions. Not blackmail, fake complaints, and harassing a damn lawyer with a courtroom kill streak." I chuckled. "You read my record? I Googled you after she sent that first letter. Honestly, she picked the worst target imaginable. The thumb drive contained everything she promised, and more. A draft document titled Emergency HOA Resolution 4A, which, if enacted, would retroactively reaffirm jurisdiction over non-conforming parcels based on a fabricated community vote. It was undated, unsigned, but clearly prepared. A memo suggesting the HOA create a paper trail of violations against me to establish a pattern of non-compliance. Multiple emails from Karen encouraging board members to coordinate complaints using anonymous emails. She even included templates. Audio from a board meeting where Karen flat out says, "If we turn the neighborhood against him, he'll either leave or fold. No one wants to live surrounded by enemies." I stared at the screen for a long time after that. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about dues. It was about control, image, ego. And Karen Beckett had weaponized her position to punish someone she couldn't intimidate. "Why now?" I asked Molly. She hesitated. She told me if I didn't stay in line, I'd be next. She said she had dirt on my husband's VA claims, which, by the way, is total bull. But I realized, if I keep going along with this, and it goes to court, I'll be just as liable. "You will," I said bluntly. "But if you cooperate fully and testify, you might avoid the fallout. You'll still be on the record, but not as a co-conspirator." She nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. A written statement, an affidavit, testimony if it comes to that, and your help with one more thing." She narrowed her eyes. "What?" "We're going to let Karen hang herself. Publicly." 2 weeks later, a flyer went out from the HOA. Another community roundtable hosted at the local library. The title, Preserving Community Integrity in a Time of Change, subtle like a brick through a windshield. I RSVP'd immediately when I walked into the meeting room. It was packed, maybe 30 people, mostly homeowners, retirees, a few folks I didn't recognize. At the front stood Karen in her best benevolent tyrant cardigan, flanked by Randall, trying and failing to smile like a human being. Molly sat off to the side, eyes low, quiet. Karen launched into her usual sermon: values, order, the importance of uniformity. Then she pivoted. There are times when individual actions, though well-intended, jeopardize the harmony we've built. One homeowner has refused to acknowledge shared standards. We've tried patience, we've offered support, but we cannot allow disorder to flourish. Gasps rippled. She hadn't named me, but she didn't have to. I stood. Ma'am, I said loud enough for the whole room to hear, are you suggesting that someone outside the HOA should be required to follow your association's rules? Karen froze. Sir, this is a community issue. We're all stakeholders. Except I'm not. I have a court ruling. You've seen it. You've ignored it. Instead, you've sent false invoices, trespassed on private property, orchestrated zoning and tax complaints, and encouraged anonymous harassment. Shall I go on? She blanched. You're twisting the facts. Would you like me to read them aloud? I have your emails printed. I have audio. I have witness testimony. I gestured to Molly, who met her gaze for the first time, and gave the smallest nod I've ever seen that still managed to carry the weight of betrayal. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Wait, what the hell is going on?" Another voice, "Is this true?" Karen tried to recover, but the room was already shifting. People leaned toward me, away from her. That quiet recalibration of power. Before leaving, I walked up to the front and handed Karen a sealed envelope. Consider this your official cease and desist. You'll want to read it carefully. The next one comes stamped by a judge. And just like that, the room turned. There's something cathartic about filing a lawsuit. The clicking of the keyboard, the rustle of legal documents, the moment you print that final page with the case caption bold at the top. Plaintiff, Caleb Sloan, defendant, Willow Crest HOA, and Karen Beckett, individually and in her official capacity. You almost forget how long you've been waiting for that strike to land. Almost. I filed 2 suits within the same hour. The first, a civil complaint against the HOA for trespass, unlawful harassment, fraudulent attempts at fee collection, and abuse of process. The second, directly against Karen Beckett, for defamation, malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and coordinated abuse of government systems. I served Karen at her front door, personally. I stood on the HOA manicured grass, handed her the thick envelope, and said with complete calm, "You've been officially invited to the adult table." She slammed the door in my face, which was fair. The hearing was set just 3 weeks later, fast-tracked because of the active complaints and the escalation of civil matters. I wasn't looking for money, though I knew I'd win it. I was looking for a legal stake to the heart, something permanent. A ruling that would live in the records and haunt every future overreach this HOA ever attempted. My evidence package was over 200 pages with 77 individual exhibits. Among them, time-stamped security footage showing board members trespassing. Emails and digital correspondence obtained through Molly, including explicit instructions to target me through complaints and paper violations. Audio from the community meeting. Copies of zoning, noise, and tax filings, all traced back to HOA accounts or Karen's personal email. The legal deed and court ruling, excluding my property from HOA governance, signed and dated 6 years prior. Karen arrived at court with a lawyer I recognized immediately. Jeffrey Abrams, loud, performative, aggressive, a nuisance in a suit. He'd once tried to sue a disabled vet for having a therapy garden on land with HOA restrictions. I buried him in cross-examination back in 2019. He strutted into the courtroom like a peacock with a briefcase, spoke over the judge, and objected to his own client's statements twice in the same hour. I didn't even have to work that hard. Under oath, Karen tried to claim she believed I was part of the HOA based on inherited obligations, some fictional legal theory involving jurisdictional adjacency. I waited for her to finish spinning that cobweb, then introduced Exhibit 34, the HOA's own map dated after my parcel had been legally removed from their boundaries. Her signature was on the bottom. She shifted in her seat. Then came the cross. Mrs. "Beckett," I said, standing just close enough for her to see my grin, "were you aware that submitting knowingly false complaints to zoning and tax authorities is a misdemeanor offense in the state of Colorado?" She blinked. "I didn't." I raised a hand and clicked the remote. Exhibit 52, the email she sent to Randall, forwarded by Molly, titled "Ways to Keep Pressure On." It listed 3 departments by name. Gasps in the gallery, audible. The judge, an older man with a crusty exterior and a fondness for decorum, leaned over his bench and said, "Mrs. Beckett, as a licensed attorney, you should have been aware of the consequences of your actions. This isn't overreach, it's vendetta." "Mr. Sloan, I hope you're charging your full rate for this." I offered a modest smile. "It's pro bono, Your Honor. Personal satisfaction is enough." The court ruled in my favor on all counts. HOA was ordered to pay $95,000 in damages and legal fees. Karen was held personally liable for $15,000, but the real win came in the injunction. Willowcrest HOA was forbidden from any further attempts to enforce authority over non-member parcels. Karen Beckett was formally sanctioned for abuse of legal systems and referred to the state bar for disciplinary review. A permanent restraining order was issued against any member of the current HOA board from contacting or entering my property. The final cherry, when the judge asked if I had anything else to add, I simply said, "No, Your Honor, I believe the message has been delivered loud and clear." And judging by Karen's expression, it had. I didn't hear from Karen for 3 days after the ruling. Not a letter, not a knock, not a late-night drone buzzing over my fence, just silence. A heavy, brooding kind, like the air before a thunderstorm that never comes. On the 4th day, she cracked. I was working on a new section of the curtain wall when I heard tires screech down the cul-de-sac. A familiar white Lexus pulled into the HOA Community Center's parking lot like it had a vendetta against asphalt. Karen got out, heels clicking like gunshots, and stormed into the building, slamming the door behind her. Within an hour, the email started flying. One of my neighbor contacts forwarded me the first thread. Karen had called an emergency executive session of the board. No agenda, no transparency, just one item: addressing extraordinary legal exposure. Apparently she still believed she could salvage it, but the board wasn't having it. Randall, finally realizing he was in a ship that had hit every legal iceberg in the lake, resigned that night. So did another member, Linda, whose only contribution to the HOA in the last 5 years was organizing bunting for the 4th of July. The next day, I got a copy of a vote passed unanimously by the remaining members. Karen Beckett is hereby suspended from all official functions pending internal review. Translation: she was out. But the real fallout was just beginning. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office issued a formal statement acknowledging a pattern of misused emergency services calls from a specific Willowcrest resident. While they didn't name her publicly, everyone knew who they meant. Karen was quietly added to the department's internal misuse registry, which meant future non-emergency 911 calls from her number would be flagged and deprioritized. Then came the state bar. The complaint I filed, backed by evidence from the court, triggered an expedited ethics review. And while I wasn't privy to the entire process, I did receive an official notice confirming that attorney Karen Beckett's conduct has been referred to disciplinary counsel for violations of Rule 8.4 of the Colorado Rules of Professional Conduct. A few days later, a sign went up on the HOA Community Board: special election, open seats for president and treasurer. The phrase "open seat" felt generous, more like evacuation notice. Meanwhile, I received an envelope, not from the HOA, but from a neighbor I barely knew. Inside was a handwritten card that read, "Didn't have the guts to say it before. Thanks for standing up. Most of us just gave up years ago." It came with a pie, pecan, still warm. I didn't know whether to laugh or check it for poison. Over the next week, 4 other neighbors dropped by with similar messages: reluctant gratitude, cautious friendliness. Apparently my battle with Karen had sparked something in them. They'd endured her for years. Her rules, her power plays, her rigid control of every lawn, light bulb, and mailbox color. But no one had ever taken her head on. Until now. And as the board scrambled to pick up the pieces, something else happened. Quiet, subtle, but seismic. The HOA's newly appointed acting president, a man named Jules Crawford, retired engineer, mild disposition, zero tolerance for nonsense, issued a statement saying the board would undergo third-party oversight for the next fiscal year. He also confirmed that HOA enforcement jurisdiction would be clarified and published publicly, including a detailed map so no confusion ever arises again regarding inclusion or authority. I read the statement with a grin. They weren't doing this out of principle. They were doing it out of fear. Fear of what I'd just done and what I could still do. And that was more powerful than any court order. Karen, for her part, vanished. Her Lexus sat unused in the driveway for days. Then one day, it was gone. Neighbors say she packed up and left for her sister's place in Durango for some rest. Sure, let's call it that. The new fence was finished by late October. 6-foot cotton steel all around the property line, heavy and unapologetic. I'd hired a local welder named Hank, grizzled, grumpy, reliable, who installed every panel like he was sealing off Fort Knox. When we were done, I bolted on a sign right at the main entrance. Private property, not HOA land. Lawyer inside. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And they were. I didn't expect applause, but I got it. Literally. The day the sign went up, 3 neighbors driving past honked. One of them even slowed down long enough to yell, "About damn time." The video of the HOA meeting, Karen's implosion, my little legal TED Talk, Molly's stone-faced nod had made its way online. I didn't post it, but someone had. Reddit got to it first, then Facebook groups, then local news. Within a week, the headline was everywhere. HOA tries to bully lawyer homeowner, instantly regrets it. The footage was clipped, memed, subtitled. One version added dramatic violins and a slow zoom on Karen's face as I dropped Exhibit 52. Another put Randall's reaction in a frame with the words, "This MF realized he bet on the wrong horse." I didn't mind. Let them laugh. It made the story stick. A few days later, I got a call from a podcast producer. They wanted to do an episode on HOA overreach. I said no, then yes, then no again. In the end, I agreed under one condition. I'd talk only if it included real legal information. No clickbait, no cheap outrage, just the facts. The episode was called "Not All Fences Are Metaphors, But Mine Is." That's when things really took off. My inbox blew up with messages from people across the country, Texas, Florida, Oregon, sharing their HOA horror stories. Some were absurd. They tried to evict my therapy chicken. Some heartbreaking. My mom lost her house over a paint color. I couldn't take every case, but I started connecting people with resources. Consumer rights attorneys, property law clinics, state ombudsman offices. I even put up a simple website. Nothing flashy. Just a PDF titled "Your Rights Against HOAs," a homeowner's toolkit, and links to every relevant Colorado statute I'd cited in court. The download count hit 23,000 in a week. Soon after, I got a call from a state representative. He'd heard the podcast, seen the coverage, and wanted to talk policy. "This isn't just a neighbor spat," he said. "This is a structural abuse of power hiding behind bylaws. You made people care. That's rare. I don't know what'll come of it. A bill, maybe. Oversight measures. At the very least, a few more people reading the fine print before signing anything with the word covenant." As for Willow Crest, the HOA underwent a full audit, financials, procedures, board training. Jules, the new president, actually stopped by one afternoon with a peace offering, a 6-pack of local beer, and a handwritten apology on official HOA letterhead. I told him to keep the apology and hand me the beer. We sat on my porch in silence, watching the foothills fade into dusk. The HOA adopted new bylaws, tightened transparency rules, and, most importantly, published a jurisdictional map with highlighted exclusions, mine top among them. They even mailed it out. I keep a framed copy in my office. Karen never came back. Her house went up for sale within 2 months. The listing had the gall to advertise strong community leadership. I laughed until I choked. I didn't fight this war to prove I was right. I already knew that. I fought because I've seen what happens when petty power goes unchecked, when people like Karen weaponize neighborhood pride into control. But now, the sign is up. The gate is closed, and the only footsteps in my yard are mine. Well, mine and the occasional squirrel.